case study is about a 19-month-old little girl who I was able to see in her home through the New Hampshire Special Medical Services nutrition program. And she had a complicated past medical history, which included being a 25-week gestational age preemie. She was in the NICU for 37 days following her birth with a prolonged mechanical ventilation, intracranial hemorrhage, and she had a VP shunt placed. She was diagnosed with BPD, cerebral palsy, reflux, failure to thrive, constipation, vision impairment, and also developmental delay. And she was referred to the nutrition program by her pediatrician as well as her early intervention therapist for concerns regarding poor weight gain, length of time required to feed orally, inadequate nutritional and fluid intake to meet needs. When I assessed her, her growth parameters were as follows. Her weight and height significantly were below the 3rd percentile for corrected age using the CDC growth charts. Her weight for height also was well below the 3rd percentile. She was about 76% or 77% of her ideal body weight for height, which indicated grade 2 malnutrition by the Waterlow criteria. Dietary assessments revealed that she was taking intact milk protein-based toddler formula by bottle, but she wasn't able to hold her bottle on her own. She averaged about 8 to 12 ounces of formula per day. She would be sitting in a high chair at the table, and her mother would be feeding her purees by spoon as well as some mashed table foods. And she was averaging volumes of about 2 to 3 ounces for each meal, but each meal would take 1 to 1.5 hours to complete. The mom also reported that the child never really seemed to appear hungry 2 to 3 hours after meals, and she also continued to have issues with reflux. This little girl was passing an average of 1 hard stool each day to every other day, and there was a lot of straining going on. Her average intake was about 90 calories per kilo per day and provided 1.6 grams of protein per kilo per day and also 400 cc's of free water per day. And I estimated her needs to be 133 calories per kilo per day, 1.6 grams of protein per kilo per day for catch-up growth, and fluid needs were estimated to be 660 cc's per day. And so basically she presented with poor growth, inadequate calorie intake, inadequate fluid intake, and she was utilizing all of her energy and time for feeding. It also put a lot of stress on her family home life. So the initial intervention included a high-calorie diet with small, frequent feedings, and that was attempted with limited success because basically the mother already was feeding her as high-calorie foods as she could. So a G-tube was placed at 24 months of age, and the formula was changed to a peptide-based formula, which was 30 calories per ounce. There were prebiotics in the formula, and she was put on a regimen of night continuous feeds at 35 cc's an hour for 10 hours, and then daytime boluses during her 2 nap times, which totaled 180 cc's. And she was continuing to orally feed for her 3 meals and 2 snacks a day, but we limited the meal times to 30 minutes, so no more 1.5-hour meals. And then also we tried working on a variety of modes of drinking rather than just the bottle. So sippy cups were introduced as well as some things with flip-top straws. So after this intervention, her reflux events were minimal. She started to have 1 soft bowel movement per day. Her total intake was up to 115 calories per kilo per day, and she was meeting 90% of her fluid needs. And she started to gain weight. Her weight for height went up to the 83% of her ideal body weight for height 6 weeks after G-tube was placed. So you can see that switching to a predominantly whey peptide-based formula for G-tube feeding significantly improved this child's calorie intake, fluid intake, tolerance to feedings, and bowel movement regimen, which ultimately impacted on an improvement in this child's growth as well as her quality of life and the family's quality of life. And the child continues to explore a good variety of feedings orally, but the G-tube has really taken off the stress that used to be evident at every meal. So she's really thriving now.
Okay, everyone. Thank you, Trish, Gail, and Sharon. And I would like to now open it up to questions. And just a friendly reminder for all of you participating in the conference that if you have muted your phone, you will just need to hit *6 to unmute your phone. And before you ask a question, if you could just identify yourself and just let us know where you're calling from. And since we have 80 facilities participating in the conference today, what I think we might do is have the first 2 questions come from the eastern side of the country, and maybe the next 2 questions from the central part of the country, and then the next 2 questions come from the west side of the country, and then we'll just kind of open it up in general to any questions that people might have after that. So we can go ahead and get started with the first question.
Specifically referring to last year.
Kathy, this is Lori Sullivan from, you have a question?
Hey, go ahead, Lori.
Hi, yes, I was wondering when you're figuring the BMI for age, are you using the height age or the actual age of the patient?
We would use the actual age.
Are you also doing the same thing for your micronutrient needs, also vitamins and minerals?
Yes.
Thank you.
But actually, I just want to add, but for a preemie, you would use the corrected age. So in general, well, BMI charts only start at age 2. So sometimes it's good to look at both, where they are, for their chronologic age and then also for their corrected age. But I think in general, we want to look at BMI, well, mostly for chronologic age, yeah. Yeah. It should be really chronological age.
Yep.
I have a question. Hi, this is Sandra Whittington from All Children's Hospital. I have a question.
Go ahead.
You had mentioned talking about the gap between a weight age and length age. I never heard of looking at that gap. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. What you would do is take a look at the child's weight and see where it falls at the 50th percentile and then track down to their age. So the average 7-year-old would weigh X number of pounds. And then you would take a look at the child's height and see, for example, where that length age would cross the 50th percentile, then track down to the age and compare. That would be called the length age. And you want those to be as close as possible, that ideally the weight age would equal the length age. If there's a big gap, for example, if the length age is a lot higher than the weight age, the child's going to be thin and their weight would be low. If it's the opposite, the weight age is higher than the length age, then the child, they're too heavy for their length. So we try to get that gap as small as possible. But I use that measurement often when I have a child that's below the 3rd percentile for both height and weight, and I kind of look at it and go, geez, what does this tell me? So if I can take that number that's below the 3rd percentile and bring it over all the way to the 50th, so for example, if I have a child that's 2, but their weight age at the 50th is 6 months, and their height age is, let's say 2 months or something, then I've got this big gap there, and I need to lessen that. So I don't know if you have a growth chart in front of you, but if you can, plot somebody below the 3rd percentile and then move them over to the 50th, it kind of helps you to see, because some kids are actually doing okay below the 3rd, especially for new patients that you don't have any past measurements, and you're like, geez, what does this tell me? Not a whole lot. But if you can kind of have other ways to assess them, it might help.
Thank you. Another way I assess kids less than the 3rd percentile is to look at their incremental growth factors. Do you ever do that? Plot them on the incremental growth charts?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll assume everyone has asked their questions, and on behalf of Nestle Nutrition, I'd just like to thank you all for participating in today's teleconference, and have a great day.